Now guys, in this lecture we are going to understand all the concepts related to cookies. So first of all, we are going to understand the session tracking using cookies. So HTTP is a stateless client server protocol where a client makes a request and the server responds with the data. And the next request that comes in an entirely new request and unrelated to the previous request. So the design of HTTP request is such that they are all independent of each other. When you add an item in your shopping cart while doing online shopping, the application needs a mechanism to tie the item to your account. Each application may assert different ways to identify each session. So the most widely used mechanism to track session is through a session ID set by the server. As soon as user authenticates with a valid username and password, a unique random we can say session ID is assigned to the user. On every request sent by the client, it should include the unique session ID that would tie the request to the authenticated user. And the ID could be shared using the get method or the post method. When using the get method, the session ID would become a part of the URL. When using the post method, the ID is shared in the body of the HTTP message that we have seen in the last lecture. And the server who maintain a table mapping usernames to the assigned session ID. The biggest advantage of assigning a session ID is that even though HTTP is stateless, the user is not required to authenticate every request. The browser would present the session ID and the server would accept it simply. So session ID has a drawback too. So anyone who gains access to the session ID could simply impersonate the user without requiring a username and a password. So also the strength in the session ID depends on the degree of randomness used to generate it, which would help to defeat the brute force attack. So now let's understand what is a cookie. So cookie is the actual mechanism using which the session ID is passed back and forth between the user, or we can say client, and the web server. When using cookies, the server assigns the client a unique ID by setting the setCookie field. That is why I have taught you setCookie parameter. So in the HTTP request header, so when the client receives the header, it will store the value of the cookies, that is the session ID, within the browser and associate it with the website URL that sent it. When a user simply revisit the original website, the browser will simply send the cookies value across identifying user. So besides saving the critical authentication information, cookie can also be used to set preference information for the end client such as language. So the cookie storing the language preference for the user is then used by the server to display the web page in the user preferred language when the user came back. So then we are having, now first of all, let's see how the cookies flow between the server and the client works. So now, as we are having this particular picture or the screenshots, so the cookie is always set and controlled by the server. And the web browser is only responsible for sending it across the server with every request. So in this particular screenshot, we can see that a GET request is made to the server and the web application on the server chooses to set some cookies to identify the user, and the language selected by the user is previously requested. So in subsequent requests made by the client, and the set cookie becomes the part of the request. Okay, so now let's understand what is persistent and non-persistent cookies. So here you can see we are having three links. So now let's understand what is persistent and non-persistent. So cookies are divided into two main categories. Persistent cookies are that simply who stores on the hard drive as a text file. Since the cookies is stored on the hard drive, it would survive a browser crash. A cookie, as mentioned previously, can be used to pass sensitive authentication or authorization information in the form of session ID. So if it is stored on the hard drive, you cannot protect it from the modification by a malicious user or attacker. You can find the cookie stored on the hard drive when using Internet Explorer as you can see in this particular location. Okay, so this is the location where you can find the cookies which is stored into your hard disks. So this is how you can see persistent. A non-persistent is nothing but it is not stored on the hard drive. Okay. So now let's understand the cookies parameter. So as you can see, in the addition to name and the value of the cookie, there are several other parameters set by the browser or web server that defines the reach and availability of the cookies, as you can see in this particular screenshot. So here we are having some parameters. So let's first understand the domain. Okay, so here we are having set cookie. Inside this we are having, okay, let me first change the color. Here we are having this particular cookie parameter, set cookie parameter. Inside this we are having domain. Okay, so this simply specifies the domain to which cookies would be sent. So then we are having path. So this is the path. To further lock down the cookie, the path parameter can be specified. If the domain is specified is email.com and the path is set to the mail, and the cookies would only be sent to the page inside email.com mail, which you can see here, email.com mail. Okay, so then we are having HTTP only, which is here. So this is parameter that is set to mitigate the risk posed by the cross-site scripting attackers, and JavaScript won't be able to access the cookie. So then as you can see, HTTP only, expired. Okay, so here we are having expires also. So this cookie will be stored until the time specified in this parameter. So this is how set cookies and persistent, non-persistent cookies parameters all looks together. So this is all for this lecture.